Hi there, my name is Ian Treveth and I'm the Education and Outreach Director here at the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. And this is A New Way to Museum. Today we're going to talk about what makes a fossil, what is a fossil, what kinds of things are fossils. But before we get going on that, we would really like to encourage you to like our channel on YouTube and click the like button and share. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about what is a fossil. It seems like a very simple thing, but a lot of people actually don't have a real clear idea of what makes a fossil a fossil. So let's start with some basics. We know that generally people tend to think of fossils as being really old bones. And often, because they're cool, people tend to think of fossils as dinosaurs. But not all fossils are all dinosaurs. However, all dinosaurs are fossils. So let's start with what a modern bone looks like. So I've got two skulls here, one of a cow and one of, I believe this is a large cat of some sort. I think it's a puma. And you can see how these two skulls look. Now they do vary a little bit in color, but generally they're sort of a white color. They're very light relative to their size, pretty easy to pick up. The thing about modern bone is it's calcium, it's white, and it is full of sort of air spaces, so it tends to be light to the touch. Now fossil bone is a little bit different. This is an example of a fossil bone. This actually is a dinosaur bone. It's part of a Triceratops cheek. And what we're looking at is basically, it is rock hard. And the reason for that is because this chunk of bone sat under sediment or rock layers for millions of years. And what happened during that time is the minerals from the sediment in which this fossil was buried, sort of the minerals leached into the bone and actually replaced the minerals in the bone and kind of became itself kind of rock-like. So fossil bone is very heavy, it's very hard to the touch, and it feels like a rock. So in this case, this is a 65-million-year-old bone, so that has been under the ground for quite a while. Some fossils can be hundreds of millions of years old. Some fossils can only be hundreds of thousands of years old and only be partially fossilized. So it all kind of has different kinds of variation. So not all fossils are dinosaurs. I do have some dinosaur examples here. So this would be a fossil skull of a raptor called Deinonychus. But we have other examples of different kinds of animal fossils. So this is a horse from the, I believe it's from the Miocene. So it's a little bit younger. And then we have a buffalo-like fossil here. So this would be a very bovid, cow-like creature. And again, you can kind of see there's differences in color. And what that indicates is this tells you the kind of mineral that was prominent in the sediment that these fossils were buried. So often bone will take the color of whatever minerals were present. So if you look at this bone, this was buried in sand. So you have a lot of silicates in here, but you also have some red, which indicates that there's some iron going on in here as well. So when you look at these skulls, you can kind of guess what the prominent minerals were in the sediment that it was buried in. Not all fossils are bone. There are several different kinds of fossils that don't necessarily have to be even from an animal. So for example, I have two chunks here of fossil wood. Now if you look, on first inspection, these chunks just look exactly like chunks of wood. They have the same texture and structure. It just looks like very weathered wood. But to the touch, which is a little bit hard to do on a video for you guys to touch this, so I'll do my best to describe it. This actually feels like a piece of rock. It's very, very hard, it's very dense, and it's pretty heavy. So this is a great example of a piece of wood that has been mineralized and has actually taken in the minerals from the sediment in which it was buried and is, for all intents and purposes, kind of turned to rock or has been petrified. So it keeps the exact structure of the original piece of wood, and it's just had the minerals kind of replaced. So very interesting. Another fun thing to think about that isn't a hard part or a part of an animal, it's left behind by an animal. This is an example of a coprolite. This is fossilized poop. And I'm not sure what kind of animal this comes from. I want to say it comes from something like maybe an elephant-like creature or maybe a cow-like creature, probably from the Ice Age. This doesn't look like dinosaur coprolite to me. So there you have it. You've got fossil poop. Another example of something that isn't bone is eggs. In this case, this is a dinosaur egg. So this would be from a duck-billed dinosaur. And if you look, the egg is kind of an unusual shape. It actually looks like it's been kind of squished. And that's because it has. It was under layers of sediment for millions of years, so it got a little bit deformed. So instead of round now, it looks sort of looks like a squished ball of dough or something. But this is a great example of an egg that has been fossilized. And this is how we know about dinosaur development and parenting behavior and all that kind of stuff, is examining old egg nests. So again, it's very heavy. Sometimes you can have things without bones get fossilized, like organisms that are invertebrates. So in this case, you've got a clam shell. This is a giant clam shell. Oh, it's heavy, called Inoceramus. And you can see the ridges of the clam shell. The other thing that's cool is when I turn it over, there's an oyster colony on the other side of it. So you actually have a bunch of different kinds of fossils, sort of one on top of the other. So this is an example of a shell that has been fossilized, and then on top of it, it's encrusted with smaller shells from other organisms. Very interesting. Sometimes footprints can be fossilized, and this is a really good example, and it may be hard for the camera to pick up. This is actually a dinosaur footprint, or a cast that was left behind from a dinosaur footprint. So the way that happens is, let's imagine a dinosaur is walking through some soft sediment, and let's say it's a little bit wet. Maybe it had been raining, or maybe this is on the shore of a river or lake bed, and it's right there where it's still kind of moist and muddy. And this animal is walking by, and it leaves a footprint. And then later on, things warm up, and that sediment dries out and almost becomes like cement. And that's how you end up getting these impressions. And then later on, more sediment covers it up, and this stuff becomes more resistant. So when that top sediment eventually ends up getting eroded away, this is a little harder. So that ends up becoming a footprint, a fossil footprint of a dinosaur. Another interesting thing that we often see is, this is another kind of impression. And this is another clam shell. This is a smaller clam, but you can see that there's no shell. There's just a perfect impression of the shell. And it's generally that same kind of process. The shell fell to the floor of whatever body of water. In this case, this would be ocean. And it left an impression on the ocean floor, and it got covered up rapidly with more sediment. And for whatever reason, this was a little more resistant than the top layer of sediment. So after that top layer of sediment was eroded away, what you ended up with is this beautiful impression of a clamshell, of the inside of a clamshell, even though the actual shell itself is long eroded away. Pretty cool. And my last example of an impression of sorts is sometimes when we're really lucky, we get skin impression. So this happens with all sorts of organisms, but in this case, this is a dinosaur. And this is, when we reconstruct dinosaurs, this is kind of how we know what their skin would have looked like. And the way this happens is, if you imagine a dinosaur laying down, or even if the animal died and its body weathered away and decayed and no bones were left behind, you still might end up with an impression where that animal had laid, with the same sort of concept as the footprint or the shell impression, where you've got this underlayer of more resistant sediment that has the impression, and then it eventually gets covered up by sediment that's a little bit easier to erode, and that's how you end up with skin impression. So in this case, you've got 70 million year old dinosaur skin. So I hope this helps clear up a little bit about what a fossil is compared to modern skeletons or bones, what causes the colors in fossils, and the diversity and the kinds of fossils that you can find and that actually get created over time. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it informative. And if you like this, please share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in A New Way to Museum with the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell for notifications when we release a new video. Support us on Patreon for early access and exclusive content. You can also follow us on all our social media. Links are found in the description. Thanks for watching, and follow your curiosity to new discoveries.